Oh, I think you've had 35 seconds of silence. Oh, it's going. Oh my goodness. Oh, 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 I'm so sorry, everyone. This is still, it's not quite perfect, but I think it's where it needs to be. I could go on mucking around with it for hours and hours, but it's here. Folks, are you there? Can you hear me? We are live for Rail Natter. We're an hour late. Oh my goodness, I can't remember the last time I was this late for a Rail Natter, a long time ago. I'm so sorry, everyone. Thanks so much for your patience. But it's streaming, we're here, you can hear me. Oh, right. This is going to be a fun one, isn't it? I've got messages from people going, what the hell is going on? So, excellent. Right, let's not fuss. I say let's not. Yeah, exactly. Let's not fuss. Let's crack on. Everyone, I'm so sorry it's late, but welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the InterCity 225 fades away rather relevantly, Nikki is saying, oh, crikey, someone missed a connection. I hope you're joking that you missed connections. I'm sorry I've ruined people's evenings. So, people are pickled. Good. This tweet. They are alluding to this tweet a while back that I believe has probably gone viral while I've been prepping the episode again because it was a fun thread. It was one of my favourite threads I've done. Oh my goodness. I've also melted the inside of my face when I ate beans in a panic about 2 hours ago. I should have basically spent yesterday evening doing this episode instead of whatever I did instead. I think I was working, but that's fine. Let's get my miniaturised face in the corner. Hello everyone. Usual train spotter t-shirt on there, lovely. We've now been made illegal, but more on that in next week's episode, where we'll do some news. But that's for the future. So, Margaret Thatcher being equal to the Class 43 was a thing that the HST, which is a thing that wound people up. And I kind of, sometimes it's fun to wind people up. But actually, I was making a point about this, and I stand by the fact that people who long-time watchers of Rail Natter know that I'm not happy with the fact we still run HSTs on the network. That shouldn't be confused with the fact that I overall dislike the HST. I think it's an absolutely iconic bit of design. It was genius, genuine genius in terms of its simplicity, but also what it achieved. Was it radically transformative? Well, this is what Rail Natter alternative histories are all about. By exploring the alternative history, we get to understand, well, how much impact did said thing have. So, we're going to explore the HST and explore its legacy by exploring what might have happened if it never existed. And so, yeah, with my Margaret Thatcher tweet, it was Margaret Thatcher equals a Class 43 HST, considered to have dragged the country into the modern era, but actually locked in an outdated source of power for decades, came along at a time of great change, and is often credited for more of that change than not to be the case. And hopefully I'm going to make this case, explain what I meant by this tweet as we go forward. So, let's get on with it. First of all, we've got to kind of talk about long-distance rail in GB, so England, Scotland, Wales. Long-distance rail, by which I mean kind of intercity services. What are intercity services in GB? What do they look like? What's their structure? Well, first of all, here is GB, ostensibly. Missing Anglesey. Sorry, Gareth Williams. It's gone because the SVG, I got rid of the Anglesey for no good reason, frankly. I need a better SVG, basically, don't I? I'll do it in the future. Right, so this is kind of the main intercity network in GB, right? You've got services that run through to, well, you've got also there's kind of the extra bits, but this is kind of the intercity network. So you've got kind of let's get John Madden the hell out of this. Let's go for actually, you know what? It's the pen is fine in red. So we've got kind of the West Coast main line here, kind of running up here. You've got the East Coast main line kind of running here, the Midland main line here. You've got the Great Western Main Line here. You've got the Great Eastern Main Line here. You've kind of got the Southwest Main Line, which does this, and then the Cross Country Line, which does this. That's basically the makeup of the GB Intercity network, right? And you've got the secondary bits of the North Wales Main Line. You've got the Highland Main Line. You've got the Aberdeen Line. You've got the Edinburgh Glasgow is really Intercity. TransPennine is Intercity, really. And other bits and pieces possibly exist that you could argue are Intercity. I mean, you could argue really that the line down here to like kind of Portsmouth and via kind of Basingstoke, this route is really an intercity route, but it's never really thought of as such, but it probably ought to be. And likewise, the Brighton route is really ought to be considered an intercity route. These are some omissions in kind of constant discussion. I know we talk about the North a lot, but actually it's an omission. They don't really have a good intercity service. They've got regular suburban services, but they don't really have a fast intercity service. Anyway, I digress. So let's kind of let's fade those bits that we're not paying attention to out, and just pay attention to these kind of the six main intercity routes that we've got. So we've got the West Coast Main Line, always considered the flagship. We've got the East Coast Main Line. We've got the Great Western, probably third, coming up in third. We have the Great Eastern, in fourth. The Midland Main Line in fifth, and then this cross country route in sixth. So we've kind of got in this order. The various intercity routes, and these are the ones we're going to consider because these are really the ones that the Intercity 125 ran on. So they're the ones we have to kind of think about. So let's jump to no, let's not jump to that. Let's jump to wait for it. Let's just also that the color wasn't very nice, was it? Let's keep that white. I think white looks better, doesn't it? Anyway, I digress. I think possibly white looks better with this as well. Maybe. Yeah, we're doing it. Anyway, don't mind me making my errors. The 1960s. We're going to jump straight to the 1960s. So the kind of the post-Steam era, really. We're kind of fairly well into modernisation. Much of modernisation has already made a big mess. Well, I don't agree with people who say the modernisation plan was a failure. I think much like beaching, it's an easy and lazy thing to blame for lots of problems, but actually I think the BR modernisation plan was revolutionary in lots of good ways. Okay, lots of issues with traction and diesels but really that was a rush job from above rather than a failure of the plan itself. In any case, lots of good things came in the 1960s that are massively influential over the success of the rail network. These are all beaching things, by the way. So, what was the first thing that was coming about in the 1960s? Well, in July 1965, you had the corporate identity manual. It's up behind me. I can see it. So it's over there. People can see it behind me. In fact, I can't see. There we are. Yeah, behind me. It's up here. There it is. There. Look. The corporate identity manual. This was revolutionary because it made British Railways, which then turned into British Rail, look modern. It provided it's one of the finest pieces of industrial design ever, and it modernised the look of a service. Is really, really important. It's really incredibly important that you have a uniform looking, literally metaphorically, that you have a smart, modern looking system. Really critical, and the corporate identity manual allowed that to happen. It didn't instantly make it happen, but it provided the framework to modernise and make the system look like one thing. Really, really critical. So that was in. Let me get my mouse in the right place. That was in July 1965. What followed? Well, in November 1965, you had the Intercity brand. The actual Intercity brand itself came about. So the idea of, and really what the Intercity brand meant, was about it was associated. There was no premium associated with intercity travel, but unlike in other countries actually. But Intercity was associated with a major the connectivity between major cities, and it allowed people to know, right, that's an intercity train. It's a train that goes between cities, and that actually helped remarkably with people with a sense of understanding what the timetable is. And alongside that, something arguably even more critical associated with that, which kind of really came about from April 1966 onwards. This might be loud, so just a bit of a warning.
The 0600 hours to Mali will leave from platform 6, calling all stations to Fort William. Thereafter calling at Lochailert, Aracy and Morag.
So, what was this all about? By the way, this is the start of a wonderful archive video looking at the West Island line. It's glorious. Regular timetable. This is actually, I couldn't find an actual picture of the flapper board at Euston, which I'm really sad about. Hopefully someone has one and they can send me it. But the regular, essentially clock face timings became a thing in the mid 1960s. Beaching initiative, part of modernisation, though. Really, it was a part of the longer term pre-beaching plan of the modernisation of the West Coast Main Line, and that was to provide services that were so. For example, you have hourly services to Birmingham, 2 hourly services to Manchester, and essentially you have this drumbeat service that didn't really exist beforehand, but that stability of service means that it becomes reliable. People can start relying on the railway. It becomes, you get that permanence that just didn't exist beforehand, frankly. So this is Glasgow Central, yes. No, this won't be Central. This will be Queen Street, I think. This will be Queen Street, yeah, I think. Yeah, this is definitely Queen Street. This is Queen Street Station. In any case, when BR moved to the 24-hour clock, says Barry Jones, well, perhaps. Remember to at me if you've got questions, folks. We haven't had an episode on the Identity Manual yet. We need to get Wallagram on for that one, I think. In any case, so that's a thing. The idea of this drumbeat timetable, it's not quite tacked, but actually not an unreasonable approximation of it, although at much lower frequencies than we're kind of used to today. So, the state of play. Of course my face is going to be over the top of this. I totally forgot about my face. Let me momentarily get rid of my face. So this is the slide that we're going to be relying on to kind of paint the picture, paint the story. I'm waving my arms around, but you can't see them. Romy Adicrat says Enoch Street. No, it's Queen Street. Enoch Street. Romy Adicrat, you're a troll, man. You're a troll. Anyway, yes, this is the state of play in 1965. So you have you've got the class 81 to 85, and then the 86. I think the 86 actually came out in 1965 as well. In any case, you've got the class 8Xs, the 80Xs, the 80s, hauling Mark II stock at the moment, and on an electrified railway, 100 miles an hour. So you have a pretty modern, pretty decent spec mainline railway with pretty decent signalling at that point on the West Coast Main Line. The East Coast Main Line is running at 100 miles an hour plus as well, because they've got the Deltics. They've got the Deltics running. The Great Western, not so good. The Westerns, the Class 52s, as they never really got numbered, ran at 90 miles an hour. Recently introduced by this point, though. On the Great Eastern, you had Class 40s for the most part. I don't know if 47s ever found their way onto the Midland or the Great Eastern at this point, but generally you had Class 40s and Class 45s. And then the Class 47s were running the cross-country route, actually. They were able to run at 95 miles an hour. Nerds who know more about exactly when these trains... It's worth saying that locomotive articles on Wikipedia are awful. Train nerds who write those Wikipedia articles are rubbish at writing them, because the stuff that's actually really important about exactly when they ran, the sorts of services they ran, is dispensed with for nerdery about how many rivets they had on a particular part of their paneling. Do better. The social history of these things and where they ran and the sorts of services they ran is more important, so do better. Write better Wikipedia articles. Barry Jones is saying Class 37s ran on the G as well. Yeah, I picked the higher spec of the locos that was running, and I do believe that the higher spec of the locos running on the G was the Class 40s, but Barry, you can correct me on that. In any case, this is the state of play, and you have to say, looking at this, in 1965, it doesn't look that bad. So we've got rid of, we've almost entirely got rid of steam by this point, 3 years more before steam was totally eradicated, and we've got 100 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour, 95 miles an hour on the express services. This doesn't look too bad. So already by the mid-60s, things have turned around. They're not looking too bad. if I'd had more time, I'd have put in a graph talking about the rise in ridership over the period that the HST kind of was running, but also the broader picture. But anyway, I think this is interesting for us to look at. Anyway, yeah. So here's what here's the Class 52 Western, already looking haggard by the time it was hauling blue grey. But that is a Mark II coach that it's pulling. So this is interesting. Mark II coach there being pulled. Here is a 45. I think. Yeah, it's a peak running on the Middle Main Line, and again, it's got Mark II coaches. Very nice there. Actually, what was I saying about saying that it was hauling Mark I's on the Middle Main Line, but actually it was hauling Mark II's. Possibly not by 65 though. Probably this is a 1970s photo. In fact, I'm almost positive this will be a 1970s photo. But in any case, there we go. And a 47, undoubtedly the best. This is the best diesel locomotive that has ever been, that BR has ever run. That's ever run on the GB rail network. The 47, the Clement Attlee of the of the rail network, if you like. As you can see, this one is hauling all Mark I's. But it's a pretty modern, powerful diesel locomotive there running. Happy days, nice. Class 47 doing its thing. And then, of course, on the East Coast Main Line, you do have the Deltic running. It's funny how the Deltic always looks darker. Photos of the Deltic always give it the wrong blue shade, but then all the BR blue shades are wrong in this. Is it just because it's always sunny on the East Coast? I don't know what it is. In any case, here is weirdly, there's a lot of Pullman. There's some Pullman coaches in this rake. There's a strange rake. But anyway, it's a bunch of Mark IIs being hauled by 55008 at 100 miles an hour, hammering along. Good stuff. Because, that's not bad. And of course, the main, by this point already running crack services up and down the West Coast Main Line was, this is a Class 86, I believe. And it's running, whizzing along, capable of 100 miles an hour on the West Coast Main Line. So that's all of what's going on. And in terms of how much of the railway is electrified, how much of the railway is electrified by this point? Well, in 1965, the West Coast Main Line's been electrified to through Crewe up to Liverpool and to Manchester. So not into Birmingham quite yet, though. It's running around Birmingham, the Trent Valley lines. But you have an electrified West Coast Main Line running some of the kind of the core kind of a serious volume of electric trains running at that point. That's the flagship, really, of yes, that was at Kenton. Thank you, Simon. The flagship main line for British Rail at this point is the modernised West Coast Main Line. So, 1967, things are afoot. What is afoot, you might wonder? Well, suggestions and proposals are being made for a development of the essentially a bit of a hedging of the bets, for there to be actually, you know what, I can just going to do this, and I can tell you exactly what is. Let me just do this. Thank you. Lovely. Yes, the newly appointed director of design, a chap called Walter Jowett, I think, kind of starts looking at studies for future plans and looks at the concept of a kind of a diesel electric multiple unit with a kind of a top and tailed top and tail. Oh, you can't see me wibbling my fingers around. I can do that. It's kind of a small face. Kind of a top and tailed kind of essentially locomotives top in a fixed formation with coaches in between. 1967 is when that proposal for what in the real timeline became the HST, the HSDT as it was at the time, the high-speed diesel train. This is kind of what the early proposals for it looked like, this kind of strange-looking thing right now. So it's a Bobo wheel arrangement. That's two bogies with two axles on each bogie, it's going to have 10 coaches either side. It was going to be, it was already going to, by this point, by the way, the Mark III coach was already well in development. The Mark III coach was already kind of well in development. So, what of this situation of which we speak? Well, this is kind of off the back of not really the success, but the knowledge gained by running a similar sort of formation in the form of the Blue Pullmans. And you can't ignore the similarity between these two units. There's a lot in common between these two. So, worth kind of stick that in your back pockets, jot that down in your jotters, and keep it in your back of your head. So a year later, 1968, a chap called Terry Miller arrives. Now, Terry Miller was the chief mechanical engineer of British Railways, and chief engineer for traction and rolling stock, but it's basically the chief mechanical engineer. I can't exactly remember when the titles changed, but that was in the middle of 1968 is when Terry Miller arrived. Now, in the real timeline, he was an instigator of the development of the high-speed diesel train, right? Let us jump, however, to the 1970s. We're jumping to the 1970s. And we are now, worth noting, we are now diverting from the timeline. The timelines are diverging. As with the APT episode, the timelines are diverging, and we are riding roughshod over history and bumping into a different reality. And it's worth saying that by this point, the InterCity advanced passenger train was the concept, not this branding yet, but the concept kind of was being reasonably well developed. It was let's say it was progressing. As a result of the interest in this project, where our timelines are going to diverge is that the British Railways Board, as it had already been in terms of playing down, in the reality it played down a lot of stuff related to the HST, but in this timeline, the British Railways Board, wanting to make sure that the focus remained on the advanced passenger train, well, what did it do? In our alternative timeline, yeah, that's right. Why is until I put these blinking slides together in a rush, can't you? Let me just do this and then do this. It's fine. Everything's fine. It's fine, everyone. I'm gonna just move earlier. Yeah, I think that's right. Is it right? Anyway, we're gonna go here and we're gonna do this. Nope. Well, you get the gist. I think this actually needs to. There we go. Good, fine. We're going to go here. We're going to disappear that. Yes, there we go. Now, there we go. We're cooking on gas now. Because the InterCity 125, before it even gets off the ground, is cancelled. The project is cancelled. Terry Miller is told to focus on making sure the Mark IIIs are as good as they can be. The Mark III coach design, that coach design progresses. But the InterCity 125 is binned off as a project, not to be progressed, because the APT is kind of absolutely has priority and needs to progress. Now, I think BRB should have done this. I know that the HST was very important and transformative and this and that, but I think BRB should have told Terry Miller not to do this. I think they should have told him to lay off on the InterCity 125 project. Anyway, benefit of hindsight, Let us progress. Why am I saying that? Well, let us continue. So, as I say, the Mark III coach continues its development. Here is one of the prototypes in a kind of a nice Pullman livery. It's quite nice. Arguably nicer than the Nick off of Double Arrow reckons this is a better livery than the actual livery that they ended up in, the flipped livery. But anyway, where have you all gone to, by the way? I can't see you. Here we are. Yes, Socorro. So Birmingham, the bigger city, was still served by diesels only at this point. Yeah, they didn't electrify Birmingham New Street until 1967. So we've jumped forwards to 1971. So that was all happening at the start of the 1970s. But we've jumped forwards to 1971. Because in 1971, the Mark II-D coach is introduced. So this is the... let me just whiz up here until I'm exhausted, because I'm not making any sense. What's good about this coach? Well, it's longer, it's pressurised and air-conditioned, it's got modern IC70 seats, the same seats that are being developed for the HST. Oh, is that right, actually? I don't know if that is right, but it's got nice seats. It's not. I don't know if it's got the IC170 seats yet. Has it? I can tell you this. Oh, yeah, no, they did. They did have the IC70 seats. So the IC70 seats, which were developed as part of the development for the HST, for the Mark III coaches, those got rolled into this. So you've got a modern air-conditioned coach. Now, this makes a huge difference. This is not alternative timeline. This is real timeline, by the way. This is really important because suddenly you had a comfortable, air-conditioned, either warm or cool, depending on the type of weather, coach that I think made a huge difference to the travelling experience. You can see it on regional railways when it took a lot longer for air-conditioned stock to arrive. The class 158 was the first air-conditioned train, for goodness sake, and that was only arriving in the late 80s, and that made a huge difference to the condition to regional railways. So I think that was a big difference. The interiors of these trains are pretty snazzy. I mean, good grief, this is a snazzy interior. They were modern. They felt modern. They looked modern. They had modern interiors. Suddenly the kind of the perception, when you walk into one of these trains, the perception is different to what it was. The Mark 1s are quite radically different. Right, a bit of a convergence with our APT alternative history, because in November 1971, so after the Mark 2D had been introduced, this chap, Jellicoe, where is he? There, fix that. There's too much of a rush. This chap, Jellicoe. Oh, is it Edward? Is his name Edward? I can't remember, actually. In any case, he was in charge of undoing economic problems and personally intervened in the APT project. And if you remember, this is where we have the timeline divergence in the APT episode, back in episode 6, so 99 episodes ago. Where he said that the APT was to be a project that required acceleration to be delivered quickly, and I argue this is the point in time when the APT was doomed to fail, because it was too much, it was rushed too much, and too much put onto it, too much pressure put onto it. So here's APT-E, the Experimental Advanced Passenger Train development. So as with the this is still real timeline, this bit, it gets accelerated, and this begins all the problems of the APT. And if you want to understand, we're not going to have multiple timelines. This Jellicoe is an iteration of the Admiral. I think it's the Admiral's son. It's like his 6th son or something like that. I can't exactly remember. In any case, Will, that's not an engineer, they're a politician. They're like under secretary to the privy of the, I don't know, something weird. Yeah. If you want to know what happened if he didn't do that, then the APT succeeds, and I would recommend you go and watch episode 6, because it's a very fun alternative history that you get to go and explore. But for the purpose of this episode, we're going to assume that Jellicoe gets his way, pushes the project hard, and the APT ultimately fails. So we're continuing with the APT failure timeline. We're not changing. We're just holding one variable different, and that's we're bidding off the HST. It just reminded me that I actually need to. Where is it? Did I actually get a picture of that? I didn't. Oh, I need to talk amongst yourselves, everyone, because I need to go in and grab. Is this gonna work? I think this is gonna work. Yes, good. Excellent. I need to do this, and then I'm going to do this, because I've just remembered, so someone in the chat just reminded me of the thing that I didn't do that I needed to add. So I'm currently editing the slides as we speak, because this is, what I'm like, this is what I do, isn't it? Editing on the hoof. Editing on the hoof. There we go. Yeah, there, good, fine, lovely. Oh my goodness. Okay, right, fine. Sorry, everyone. This is the sort. This works even better in audio only format. When I'm editing on the fly in audio only form, everything obviously works really well. Anyway, let me get rid of that and get rid of this, because I've done the thing I need to do, and I can now continue the chat. John Christoph, this might be preempting you a bit, but if I recall correctly, the big point of episode 6 was overall worse network efficiency. To accommodate faster trains, in this scenario, do we get better efficiency? John's thinking ahead. I'm not going to drill quite as much into the specifics actually this time, but we'll get there, John. We'll get there. Partly because I rushed too much, but also partly because I think there's enough to go through in terms of talking about the changes we talked about. We'll get there, John. You're right. We'll get there. Anyway, so That's episode 6. Go watch episode 6, for those who aren't watching live. So, 1971, what is happening? Well, this is a Class 86, and then the Class 87, which, as you can see, is a radically different design of locomotive, is introduced on the West Coast Main Line. It's not a huge difference, but that's fine. It works. Because it's electric, it doesn't need a silly pointy nose, because electricity is power. So, yes, here is a 110 mile an hour capable Class 87. This is Black Douglas, which I can't remember what number it is. Is it 8th in the series? Anyway, also you can see some nice Mark IIs in the background here. Lovely Mark IIs there, lovely. There's not much difference between these two. Clearly the photographers found their favourite spot to take photos as well. Anyway, what else is happening? Well, in 1975, the Mark IIIa coach is introduced. The loco haul, kind of the coach, the InterCity, what becomes the flagship coach. Not too dissimilar to the kind of the Mark II, the later Mark II coaches, but it's longer, quite a lot longer. It's 23 meters. No, 23 meters long. Sorry, I was getting confused with IT, which is 26 meters long. 23 meters long, so it's longer, which means you get more seats per bogie, which is good because it reduces the mass. It's also just a more comfortable space. For the time, they're safer. They are safer, stronger trains, coaches. They can run at 125 miles an hour, which is critical as well. So they provide, on the West Coast Main Line, a very comfortable ride for passengers behind a 110 mile an hour capable electric locomotive. So here we go, the Mark III coach. So let's see where we're at. It's 1975. And the state of play in 1975, I'm going to get rid of my face again. This is not Divergent, by the way. This is actually what's happening in the real time in 1975. So you'll see there's no little alternative timeline thing here, because it's not the alternative timeline. This is the actual state of play. So in 1975, you had 110 miles an hour on the West Coast Main Line, 100 miles an hour on the East Coast Main Line, and then 90 or 95 kind of on the rest of the network. So kind of okay. Interesting, fine. At 110 miles an hour is not bad in 1975, I don't think. So let's have a look at the overall electric network. So in 1975, I've stuck alternative timeline in here because, well, in 1975, actually a year beforehand, it was in 1974, in the real timeline, but actually we're saying in our alternative timeline we get electrification, and we don't just get electrification of the West Coast Main Line to Glasgow, we get electrification of the West Coast Main Line to Edinburgh as well. So this is why I've put 1975 here. So actually in 1975 we end up with a little bit of extra electrification. So they electrify up to Edinburgh as well. So you end up with the West Coast Main Line that serves both Glasgow and Edinburgh. Why did this little subtle change happen? Let's bring my little face up as well. Why did this subtle little change happen? Well, because of the lack of HST development, there's a little bit more emphasis on the need to connect the major cities. And so that there some bright spark says, oh, you know what, we'll just pop the wires over to Edinburgh. So they do. Slight little change, nothing radical, but just a little bit of a change. Anyway, so also in 1975, we get the beginnings of electrification up the East Coast Main Line. So rather than stopping, which is what happened after 1974, there was a stop. No further real major electrification happened for a long time. Actually, we had so in terms of electrification, 74, nothing really. In terms of intercity electrification, nothing happened until Bedpan was electrified in 1983. So a 9-year hiatus of kind of intercity electrification. In our timeline, no. There is no diesel alternative. Electric is the way. There is no current intercity diesel proposal that can provide the long-term needs of the network. So there is no HSDT, there's no HST, there's nothing like that in development. There is APT, so they know that they're laying the ground for the APT, but also the success of the West Coast Main Line shows that electricity and electric trains are the future. So they begin the electrification. As soon as they finish the West Coast Main Line, that team moves over and starts electrifying the East Coast Main Line. Jump forwards to June 1976. Here is APTE. Oh, APTE. Oh, what's happening in actually they retire APT and they start development on APTP on the prototype trains. So that's real. That is a thing that's happening. You see no alternative timeline bubble next to it. At the same time, and this is alternative timeline, there are some interesting experiments going on about streamlining the front of of the electric locos running up and down the West Coast Main Line. So they're experimenting with some streamlining with the hope of kind of providing a little bit better acceleration and maybe reducing power requirements and so on. But it doesn't really. It's quite slow, and there's not a particular impetus because electricity just gives you unending amounts of power. So you can power a blunt-ended thing at 110 miles an hour without too much pain. So October 1976. Well, our what we're seeing happening? Well, we've got this rather sad-looking 52 Western, because in October 1976 these are still running. There is no HST, they're still running. So no HST, no change. The 52s are still in place. They might well be running with Mark II Ds. Yes, I need to get rid of my face again. In fact, you know what? It's still the cross country is still Class 47s and Mark IIs. You don't need to see anymore. So we have. And you'll notice down here, this is the reality at the bottom. So I'm showing us what the difference is by the fact that we now have, in the real timeline, the InterCity 125 has just been introduced in 1976 on the Great Western, whereas they currently still have pretty slow timings with the Westerns, which are still running, which in our timeline will actually get tops numbers put on the side of them. Because if we jump back, these decided they did not. They've still got their D number on the side here. Look, disgraceful, bloody Western. Anyway, so no change. No change for now. Well, there is a change because electrification is continuing to roll on. And we're seeing electrification rolling out up the East Coast Main Line. Ignore the fact this says Wigan. That's fine. Yeah, we know this is from the West Coast Main Line electrification. This is from the early 70s. In any case. So in 1978, we see electrification completed on the East Coast Main Line. We see electrification completed right up to Edinburgh, through Leeds, up to Leeds, through York, and onto Edinburgh. We have electrification up the East Coast Main Line, which is exciting. And crucially, we see electrification beginning on the Great Eastern and the Great Western main lines. We see the need for electrification to roll out onto those lines too, because it's the future. There is success. Success begets success. The West Coast Main Line is doing very well. In the real timeline, the success of the West Coast Main Line was seen as the impetus for APT. But let's have a think about that, shall we? So, also, because of the success, when we see... So, with the... Oh, dear, that was a critical... You didn't want to see that. Where have I gone? Why has that gone here? There we are. In 1978, in May 1978, when electric services start on the East Coast Main Line, a new brand is introduced, InterCity Electric. So there is this new brand created, and kind of potentially an update to the liveries of the rolling stock running, the InterCity rolling stock running. But certainly the new branding, the InterCity Electric branding, starts to propagate, and it becomes, the idea of electric speed becomes, much like the InterCity 125 was. Good grief, was it on everything through the 1970s and even the late 60s, but certainly through the 1970s into the early 80s. InterCity 125 was getting hammered as branding. Well, in our timeline, InterCity Electric, or ICE, as it gets, so rather than 125, they start pushing ICE. Sorry, the Germans, but Britain beats you to it. So the I, the C, and the E becomes this sort of popular branding, and people want to get on the ICE to Glasgow. They want to get on the ICE. So the InterCity Electric brand becomes quite successful. It becomes the mainstay of long distance travel in the UK, rather than just the preserve of people on the West Coast like it was at the time. It becomes the thing for everyone. So, let's see. John Christoph, was the IRL timeline speed increase on the Great Western really just due to the rolling stock, or were any permanent way alterations needed for the faster speeds? Very good question, John Christoph. Actually, there's a paper which makes for very good reading. Maybe I'll throw it up, actually. Shall I throw it up? It's a great paper. Yeah, here we are. This paper here, High-Speed Track in the Western Region of British Railways, and it goes into the details about how much work had to be done to convert a 90-mile-an-hour railway with a 100-mile an hour sections, by the way. A conversion of this, you can see the time, this is the speed before, and this is the speed after. The before and after, to convert into 125 mile an hour running on the Great Western. And we, in our timeline and the real timeline, we saw this happening on the East Coast Main Line as well. Actually, quite a substantial amount of remodelling work. You know, we had bridges being reconstructed. Twyford, particularly, was almost totally reconstructed and realigned. You know, we saw this happening. This is the stuff happening in reality on the Great Western to get 125 miles an hour. So you're right, the train wasn't the only part of the picture. A major amount of infrastructure work was, and this is where there's some interesting track geometry markers there for the nerds. There's a nice automatic ballast cleaner for the nerds. Lots of good stuff. There's some stuff on the badminton line, which was closed for 5 months, by the way. 5-month closure. No one really remembers that. 5-month closure of the badminton line to renew it. See nice geotextile here with the ballast on. Well, actually with a sand layer, then ballast on top of that. Yes, so lots of stuff, and then there's some S&C updates as well. You see the junction work there. It's a good paper, this, by the way. You can go and find it on the IC journal. There's a nice swing nose crossing, some junction remodelling, safety staff, and then some conclusions. A little track recording monitor there to actually sort of test that the track geometry was 125 mile an hour is still being maintained. Anyway, so a very good question, John Christoph. Thank you for that. Yes, so it's not all about the rolling stock. Those upgrades were happening, and indeed those upgrades were happening to enable a kind of a gentle increasing of the kind of the service speeds on the various lines around the network. So let's jump forwards to 1978 when the East Coast Main Line is opened. It's electrified to Edinburgh. We know that. So what is the state of play now? Well, we have got 110 on the West Coast Main Line. We've got 110 on the East Coast Main Line. Then we've got 125. It's 110 because the 87 is a 110 mile an hour locomotive. So they've build a load of new 87s. The Deltics get cascaded onto the Great Western, and we do see some speed improvements. So we see some works going on the Great Western to increase speeds to 100 miles an hour. So that kind of work is ongoing. But the Deltics are cascaded onto the Great Western. The Great Eastern and the Midland Main Line and the cross country line, which I know my face is in front of, not much changes. They're staying the same. If I get rid of my face momentarily, yeah, they're still kind of doing exactly what they are. And the reality is, you can see that it's the same. Both timelines are the same for these lines. The only difference is that we've now not got 125 mile an hour Great Western Main Line, and we don't have 125 mile an hour East Coast Main Line, because the East Coast Main Line by 1978. Actually, I get the exact date because this is the first RailNatter I've done show notes for myself for. Can you imagine it? Just because I knew I was tired and I wouldn't remember all the numbers immediately accurately. Yeah, 1978 is when May 1978 actually is when the first of the HSTs were introduced on the East Coast Main Line. So you can see there's a difference, But again, it's major work happening on the East Coast Main Line to enable it. So we've got a bit of a different situation going on. Let us jump to the 1980s. All still using Mark IIs at this point. So maybe some Mark IIIs might have started appearing here, possibly. Maybe on kind of the Midland Main Line as well, but yeah, kind of slow to roll out. A lot of the new Mark IIIs went to the West Coast and also the East Coast Main Line, so they were the focus for now in our alternative time, but also kind of in the real one as well. Anyway, the 1980s arrives, and as with our APT episode, a lot of politics happens. Many activities happen that keeps everyone kind of busy, and they stop paying much attention to the railways, which is, to be honest, good. Because there's some bad news, which is that in December 1981, it hadn't been going well for the advanced passenger train in reality or in our alternative timeline. And so December 81, they don't do what happened in real life, which is where they think, we'll maybe keep this working, we'll keep funding it. No, they just they can it off. Completely can it. And they say, right, we'll take what we can, we'll use the development of this in new... We'll take the development of the APT, and we're going to dedicate it into... We're having so much luck with loco hold, rolling stock, fine. We're going to divert what we've learned, forget tilting, we're going to divert what we've learned into a new 125 mile an hour capable electric locomotive. So that's exactly what they do. So 1981. So some changes now. So 1981, in the real history, let's get rid of my face again momentarily. In real history, in 1981, the InterCity 125 made its way onto the cross-country route on some services and only at 100 miles an hour. So there's not a radical difference. Okay, the acceleration was better, and it definitely provided a better service, but not necessarily a radical alteration. Oh, by the way, in our timeline, we are starting to see Mark IIIs propagating down into the rest of the network, by the way. But we have... So in 1981... In fact, you know what? Let's jump forwards again, because in 1982, HSTs found their way onto the middle of the main line as well. So you have HSTs running both at 100 miles an hour, not 125 miles an hour. And these... So let's have a little comparison. So we've got, on the West Coast... No difference, you know. It's the same thing. On the East Coast main line, in our timeline, we've got electric 110. In the real world, it was 125 mile an hour capable in City 125s. On the Great Western, again 125 in the real world. Our timeline only 100 miles an hour with Deltics still running. You know, the Deltics still putting some miles in at this point, despite their kind of advanced years. They actually had quite a short run in real life, so to be honest, you could probably keep running reasonably well if they were dedicated, given that some of them are actually running in revenue stock every now and then on freight movements on the West Highland line. I mean, these things can work. So actually, I could genuinely believe that, and that's why I put it here, I can believe that Deltics would have run pretty well on the Great Western. It would have been quite the sight, I dare say. But we've still, on the Great Eastern and the Middle Main Line and the cross country, we haven't seen much change. These are looking a bit tired. The new coaches have made a difference, but we're still running diesel stock, and people are, maybe a little bit, kind of unhappy with the lack of change. So there's definitely like a difference here at this point. But our reality soon catches up. September 1985 sees the launch of the Class 89, 125 mile an hour capable electric locomotive, very powerful, incorporating everything that was learned from both APT and successful running of the 87s as well. So this is a good locomotive, and by this point we have seen the completion of electrification of the Great Western and Great Eastern main lines. All of a sudden, the tables turn, to my mind, of what the HST has provided. I think by 1985, a lack of HST would have been overcome by the fact we'd have had four of the main lines of four intercity main lines electrified rather than two. Because at this point, to be fair, the Great Eastern got electrified and they started running 86s. So not that different, but also again, we're seeing quite a difference. Interestingly, they basically get a load of 47s and they kind of start running 47s and Mark IIIs. They refurbish the 47s and run the 47s on both the Midland Main Line and the cross-country route in lieu of... Oh, so that should really say I screwed that up, didn't I? Wait a minute, watch this. I have the power to do this. Actually, could I probably do this, actually, because I'm going to go with the fact that... yeah, I'm doing it. I'm saying that actually they uprate the 47, if you like. It's like I don't know what uprating it would be. Oh wait a minute, no, because when was the I've totally ignored the 50, haven't I? At this point, I suppose I could have put in the Class 50 arriving, couldn't I? Because when did the Class 50 arrive? Yeah, could have thought. No, this is kind of rushed it, didn't I? Yeah, I suppose they'd have had 50s running. Was that? Did you hear that, everyone? I am 2 to 3 miles away from the nearest railway, and that was a second British Rail two-tone. I suppose I could have had 50s, yeah. So we could say like 50s up here, and here. And I suppose actually, in reality, I could have gone back here and said that these might have been running 50s. Well, yeah, possibly. 50s running at this point on here, and 50s running here, maybe. You can't actually see what I'm changing here. I'm sort of going back and playing with... could have said that 50s are here rather than... Anyway, I'm distracting myself. Right, anyway, 1985. Sorry, I'm getting lost and distracted. So, whatever we've got Class 50s, we've got 47s, whatever we end up running, whatever rolling stock we end up running. Oh, yeah, that's it. People are saying no Class 50s on the Ds. That's a very good point. So... let's have a look at the map, shall we? So we've electrified the Great Western and the Great Eastern main lines. Hooray. And we're starting to look at, because of the success of this, we're looking at the electrification of the Midland Main Line, the cross-country route, and the southwestern main line as well, down to Penzance, which really would tick off most of the intercity, in fact, entirety of the intercity network. And indeed, by 89, that's what they do. They finish those, they electrify those. So by the time we reach 1989, we have got quite a radically different looking bit of railway network to what the InterCity 125 enabled or did not enable. So we've got 125 because we've got this lovely Class 89 running on both the East Coast and West Coast main lines, and the Great Western. So we've got this situation where we've got 325 mile an hour main lines running 89s. Also, the Midland Main Line is running 125 miles an hour, although maybe on not quite as much of its length, maybe just up to Bedford. But yes, we've got 125 mile an hour running on the Midland Main Line where it's possible. Probably you can get 100. In fact, you can definitely get 125 up to Kettering North Junction. So yeah, it's doable. Decent speeds, and some other bits as well. There's bits around, Clay Cross has got through Chesterfield's pretty fast. So you get some pretty high speeds, and then on the Great Eastern and the cross country route, you see we've got 100 mile an hour running still. But with 87s pulling 3As, we have a much better railway system than there was actually at the time by this point. So by 1989, because of the momentum of electrification, we see a different railway and a better railway. And in the works is an interesting little, in the background is the development of the next generation of electric locomotive and what that might look like. Here you can see in the information in German from when we exported it, or not exported it, but we showed the Germans. We sent it to Germany to show the Germans what we were up to, because that's nice. So, yeah. So it's the late 80s, and as in our APT episode, the inevitable thing happened that is what happens if you put your entire society at the whim of a bunch of coked up yuppies. Because there's obviously just a massive crash, and the early 90s happens, and indeed we hit the 1990s. Now it takes a little bit of time to impact the railways, the early 90s recession, and by this point we have the InterCity 225 running. The InterCity 225, and it's not just running on the East Coast Main Line, it's running, or eventually will run, on the West Coast, East Coast, Great Western, and it cascades the 89s onto the other parts of the network, which in turn more track works to allow sections of 125 mile an hour running. So on all of by kind of the early 90s, we're seeing 125 mile an hour running on quite a lot of the rail network. Quite a difference, really. And I say quite a difference. The reality is, so I'm going to get rid of No Face and kind of start addressing the point that that John was just making earlier. Yeah, rewritten history. That's right. Yes, we'll get to the Transpennine. Well, I've kind of excluded the secondary routes because actually you might have seen electrification on those as well. But I've kind of excluded them at this point because there's a lot of variables to play with. I was kind of just trying to make the broad point about the main lines and about the things that impacted on and benefited kind of in-city travel. So I think by 1991 that there's not much difference actually, other than the fact that you've got a much more electrified network. What we do see is, because of the fact that we've got a much more electrified network, just as John was alluding to, John Christoph Morgan, hello in the chat, by the way. John Christoph was alluding to the fact that because of with an electric railway, you can run everything much more like the acceleration behaviours of all the stock are much closer together. So actually, you get more capacity with an electric railway, quite substantially more, like measurable amounts more capacity on an electric railway than a diesel one. And as a result of this, we don't see the closure that we got with APT. We saw that we were seeing many more local stations closed and fewer local railways. Fewer intermediate railway services. We don't see that with this timeline. In fact, we potentially see an increase in the number of intermediate services, because not only have you got the acceleration that the HST did provide with electric locos, but also you've got the ability to fit many more trains in amongst each other, so you end up being able to run more services around. And also electric trains, the 89 accelerated. Our hypothetical 89 accelerates very impressively. But also the new rolling stock coming in our alternative timeline. You know, you see, because of the fact you've got electric railways, you see more electric multiple units being developed. You see more interest in, you know, those perhaps the networkers arrive earlier. You know, so you see an upgrading of electric railways are a positive feedback loop in allowing a better overall system. You know, not just the service, but the system is better. So the timelines have converged at that point. One definite loss, one downside, if you like, is that the InterCity XPT, which I find hilarious because it's an InterCity 125 with APT branding on it. Very strange. In any case, the export of this with Bud cars, weirdly, to Oz, it doesn't happen. So Oz, you're on your own. You've got to come up with your own new trains. Sauce, folks. John Christopher's asking if we're hearing 125 mile an hour intermodal container trains. Well, this is the socialist utopia we were promised. Yeah, well, quite possibly. Even in our timeline, the 89 is very quick off the mark. Yeah, thanks, Alfonso. Yeah, true. Oh, so. Let's get my little face back. That was a high-speed whiz, literally and metaphorically, through a bit of alternative history. I wanted it to be a shorter one, hence why I didn't go into quite as much detail about kind of the nuances and subtleties. But I think that given the HST provided the same thing that hydrogen and battery trains have been providing and bimodes have provided, which is an excuse for government not to do anything. If you take that excuse away, their hand could be forced. And you could argue that actually we get nothing. We get no treats at all if the HST didn't arrive. I am not so sure, because the West Coast Mainline electrification was an unmitigated success. And this is where I think that the success, the importance of the HST as a train has been overplayed, because on the West Coast Mainline, ridership doubled on the West Coast Mainline between 1965 and 1972, I think. I've got the numbers in front of me here. 62 and 75, sorry. Passenger traffic doubled on the West Coast Mainline between those times. Yeah, so that's an enormous leap on, you know, with electric trains arriving earlier on the East Coast, I think, and indeed on the Great Western. So there we go. That's my comparison, and I think it remains. I'm going to make her go away. Don't worry. In fact, I'll make my large face appear here. I think that I stand by it. I damn well stand by it as well. Where do North of London Eurostar Nightstar services fit in this timeline? Oh, we could get complex. There's a lot of other variables we could throw in. I decided that we'd have ended up with a 2 hour. I've got a meeting that was 2 minutes ago with Will. Will, as soon as this episode ends, I will jump onto the Discord. Anyway, Australia gets the F40s. Yeah, quite possibly. In any case, to reassure people, this isn't that I don't, it's not that I don't love the HST. I think the HST is a fantastic train, and I've had a cab ride in 125 miles an hour in it, and it was tremendous fun. I just think that there's a little bit of hagiography associated with the train and with its impact. I think the bigger impact comes from air-conditioned, modern coaching stock, regular timetables, and the modern look of British Rail that happened in the mid-60s. I think those are the critical thing. British Rail just radically modernised, and that bedded in. By the time we got to the early to mid-1970s, that modernisation had started bedding in. It was noticeable. By the mid-60s, it still wasn't. By the mid-70s, it really bedded in quite well. And I think that had the HST not arrived, and instead you had, APT still fails, but you have this drive for running electric services everywhere, I think you'd have seen a better railway network than we have now, actually. That doesn't stop me then wanting to, remind us all what the HST is all about. This is going to be loud. I should have pre-warned you, but this is going to be loud. Oh, that's going to full power in an HST power car. It's quite nice. Not a Valenta though, sadly, but anyway, still fun. Still knackered looking. Oh, crikey, that was it. Yeah, that was loud. Everyone is now deaf. Marvellous. Sorry about that, particularly in audio-only form. You can complaints to the PayPal. This is available in podcasting platforms everywhere, left, right, and centre. Do come and listen. Oh, crikey. patreon.com/GarethDennis for supporting more of this sort of thing. So, I've still got my little face in the corner. I never do that, do I? Let's get rid of that. The merch is not a thing at the moment. It'll be back hopefully soon. PayPal.me/GarethDennis to shout at me about the loud noise. And GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord, an incredibly lively community. I love all of you. It's a great place, and you can discuss this to your heart's content. This little tidbit of an episode. And if you want me to peel away and pick up and explore other bits, then you can do so. Tell me if you're a Patreon supporter, you can suggest that we pick up elements of this and explore them further in a future episode. What else is going on? The last episode 58 of the Archipelago series has been renamed to Bristol Loses Its Tracks, because spoiler alert, that happened. But also the next episode 59, Aviation Takes Off, which was supposed to be episode 58, but we didn't get there because history is taking longer to happen. But it's all fine and good. But before that, this Friday, episode 58.1. It's a Patreon-only episode, so you can only get this episode if you're a Patreon subscriber. We're going to do some recording of corporate history. We don't progress history in these episodes, but we do have a look at things. We will be having a look at things. So we're going to record some corporate history. We're going to go through and have a look at some of the companies around the island of Amphitrus. So tune in for that. Whew. Next week, episode 126. It's going to be a newsy episode, so it'll be 50% news, but also the other 50%, we will do a page turn through the Transport Select Committee's Integrated Rail Plan Inquiry Report. There's a mouthful. Hooray! We're going to have a look at that, and we'll have a look at that, and hopefully there'll be some stuff for us to learn. We'll see if there's anything in there. I haven't done a proper... I have read through it, but I haven't done a page turn. It'd be fun to do a page turn with all of you, so let's have a look at that. Oh, that was a bit chaotic. I'm sorry I was an hour late, everyone. It's really not good enough, was it? But and I'm sorry I've not followed the chat deeply because I'm more tired than I thought I would be. And but I think I picked up a few things. Hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully it lived up to the hype of the previous one. I enjoyed putting it together. Not as detailed as the APT one. Probably not quite as good, but I still enjoyed it. Hopefully you all enjoyed it too. Them's me thoughts. We didn't get to play with the APT formations like we did last time, but also I kept it to an hour-ish, so, swings and roundabouts. Right, anyway, everyone. It's been a pleasure. I will see you all next week. Or I'll see some of you on Friday night. In any case, the only remains for me to wave vigorously at the camera while I say cheerio. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio. I'll see those of you who know who you are momentarily. Bye. Cheerio.